Hi, and welcome to the Green Room, backstage here at the Koger Center for the Arts. Here to talk about our first concert, Masterworks concert of the season, with the theme The Rose of Sonora, which is the title of one of the pieces, centerpiece of this evening's concert. We ended last season with the epic Mahler Symphony No. 1, but also with a side-by-side performance of Copland's ballet score, Billy the Kid. And we're kind of continuing on with this sort of Western/cowboy theme a little bit for this first concert of the season. So the entire concert, it's an all-American concert, opening with a piece by John Williams, of course, of the soundtrack fame, of course. Before he wrote, I guess, many of his signature soundtrack works, let's say the Star Wars franchise, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, all of these films. In 1972, one of his earlier successes as a Hollywood film composer was his music for John Wayne film from 1974, The Cowboys. And since then, it's actually the theme music from this, John Williams's music, has become sort of a concert staple. Sometimes you even hear it, like you will on this program, on a what we might consider quote-unquote classical concert, like a subscription concert, as well as on maybe the Pops concerts where you would hear a lot of soundtrack music from other films. This one is it's one of those brilliantly conceived showpiece for orchestra. You can hear some of the influences where John Williams got his influences as a film composer. And it'll be interesting to compare for you listeners out there, compare the sound world that John Williams created for the Cowboys at the beginning of the concert, and then kind of trace back several decades to the 1931 Grand Canyon Suite by Frédéric Roffet, which ends the concert. And the sort of the cinematic nature of that piece from the Grand Canyon Suite, and compare, think of pieces like the Billy the Kid or other pieces like Copland, the sort of what we think of American sound, symphonic sound, and what we think of when it comes to sort of the huge Hollywood blockbuster film score. And you got all of this sort of packed into this exciting overture by John Williams that will open our season, open this concert as well. Then we kind of go into we stay with this cowboy theme a little bit, and we go to this the most recent piece on this program, which was just completed a few years ago by a noted film composer, George S. Clinton, who is actually now based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and he'll be here in Columbia for the concert and related activities as well. So we're very much looking forward to having George in town with us. This is a special collaboration George had with a violinist, Holly Mulcahy, who is also the feature soloist for our performance as well. Holly is currently currently the concertmaster of the Wichita Symphony, and she also heads off the whole program for community engagement, sort of the audience development and community engagement initiatives from the performer's perspective. I've gotten to know Holly actually sort of through her blog initially several years ago. And I was always impressed by her approach to programming, her approach to making music, classical music, accessible, especially symphonic music, accessible to the entire community wherever she worked. Previously, she was the concertmaster of the Chattanooga Symphony. And so this is, I think, where this collaboration started between George S. Clinton and Holly. And so Holly had this idea and she's commissioned a few new pieces, new concertos for violin and orchestra. So she approached George S. Clinton, but instead of just sort of writing your regular concerto in a way, they wanted to create something that's very unique and special. So it's the piece is called The Rose of Sonora. It's it's basically it's called Seeing in, it's a violin concerto, but it's in 5 scenes instead of 5 movements. George calls them scenes. Each scene features the main character, and what Holly wanted was a sort of a Western story where you have a strong original female lead. And so that is Rose, and Rose is also represented by Holly's violin as well. And so each scene is sort of set up in a way by a brief sort of a scene description. So as George, he's a noted film composer and composer for television and so on and big screen. He wanted to sort of, so instead of writing a soundtrack to a movie, what he imagined was sort of each listener and performer taking sort of a very general setting or scene setting, sort of a setup for each of these scenes. And then through those words that you will hear at the beginning before each movement, narrated by actually George S. Clinton himself for this concert. And then through the music that follows, we all sort of create what George calls sort of a mental movie. So like a movie with scenario and imageries in our own head. And it's sort of it's a beautiful thing. And similar things sort of really happens in Grand Canyon Suite as well. So it's sort of, you have 2 big pieces on this program that sort of really play up to every listener's imagination. And you have sort of a basic framework for a story of Rose rescuing her love Jed, from the prison. They escape, but then they're ambushed. Jed dies, and of course Rose is left for dead, and but she recovers. She go back. So there's this element of vengeance. So it's it's a riveting scenario in which you can sort of fill in the pieces, as so to speak, as a listener, as the performance unfolds. So we're very much excited to have Holly in town to play this concerto that was written for her, and of course have George S. Clinton as well, have the composer himself, and sort of narrating the scene setting with us as well. So that's the first half of the program. We kind of stay out west for the second half of the program too, and I'm very excited to sort of revisit a piece of music that I had a chance to perform a few years ago with a different orchestra, with the composer present, and that is a piece by Wang Ji, a Chinese-American composer, and it's called Symphonic Overture, America the Beautiful. And it was written back in, I think, 2016. It's a very brief, it's a 6-minute overture. It is action-packed. It's a technical showcase for everyone in the orchestra. It's brilliantly conceived, which is brilliantly orchestrated, very, very exciting. Wang Ji herself says she aims to write music that is accessible and engaging to today's audiences. And this came about, she actually calls, if you can find her website, and even if you're not a musician, she's also quite a talented writer as well. So even if you're not a musician, go to wangjimusic.org, I think. Go to her site where she kind of describes each of her pieces. That's sort of typical of every composer website. But then there are all these. You could tell what sort of you can kind of glean into her personality a little bit, which is she's very funny, very, very witty, very quick-witted. And I mean, there's like a whole section about FAQ section, which is rather unusual, where people have written in like sometimes random questions. Apparently, like Wang Ji likes to relax. She just reads like medical journals. And some people found out about this, so like they're asking, why do you do that? All sorts of things like that. Apparently, her friends sometimes call her part-time monkey, and she says that's because of her well-known love for rock climbing. As a matter of fact, we were working together in this one in another city. Apparently, and she was only there for 3 or 4 days, typical visiting guest composer type of schedule. Her and her husband somehow found the time to locate a local rock climbing gym. Because this was in the Midwest. It's not like you could actually go rock climbing in the middle of, Ann Arbor, Michigan or so. But, so when they go to cities together, they always either go hiking, do major hiking trips, or they will go rock climbing either at a gym or outside if they're out west. So she has this huge love of nature. And rock climbing, she does it. She was doing that before dress rehearsal when we worked together. And so she said this was a God-sent commission by the Colorado Springs Philharmonic back in 2016, because a lot of times when we commission pieces, the commissioners, in this case the Colorado Springs Philharmonic, sometimes they would put sort of not a condition, but we would love for you to write us a new piece, but we do have some ideas that we would love for you to incorporate. So one was, could you incorporate the theme America the Beautiful? So, okay, incorporate that melody. So feature that melody, America the Beautiful theme in some way throughout the piece. And the other one was, would you somehow pay homage to Pikes Peak? So that's, and so she thought, oh, this is perfect. It kind of combines her love of nature and outdoor hiking and all these things. And she says she particularly likes the song America the Beautiful. And thinking when this was written, she said, we are a nation divided in many ways, but also united by this awesome natural wonder. And she feels that the text of America the Beautiful really kind of is homage to that sense of unity, sense of sort of shared environment, regardless of what our beliefs might be. So she thought that was very appropriate. And then so this is where you might not notice this because she's very clever. She says, the America the Beautiful theme, you will hear that, especially in the first half of the piece. Towards the end of the piece, she says, and there are all these things that's happening in the orchestra, and there are a lot of things happening in the orchestra. And she says, and then you will recognize some fragments, like some bits and pieces of America the Beautiful theme or melody. Some of them you recognize right away because it's more obvious to the listeners. And she says some of them you might not really notice until like you hear it a few times. She's like, you wouldn't expect me to show you all my tricks like on first hearing, do you? So you can kind of tell that. And then Pikes Peak part of this element is in the score. You can see, I don't think these are in the parts. She has the silhouette sort of the Pikes Peak, sort of the silhouette of the range, mountain range. And then she wrote actually the second main idea in this piece is sort of she traces the height, sort of the shape of Pikes Peak mountain range melodically. So it's a theme that starts really low and then just goes up, then comes back a little bit, and then keeps on going back until it reaches its highest peak, and then sort of comes down, goes back up a little bit, and then all the way back down. And that becomes a fugue subject. So you will hear that in its entirety first, and then you will hear other instruments sort of joining in on that. So that becomes a major building block. So she literally sort of inserted the shape or the trace of Pikes Peak into this composition. And again, as I said, it's a fun piece. It's a brilliant showpiece that I'm very excited to include in this season opening concert. That is sort of Western, Great American West theme for this concert. Then we have our, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, piece by Ferdinand Groffet, written in 1931, the Grand Canyon Suite. Now, Groffet, probably to today's listeners, you actually have heard sort of his work without realizing it sometimes, is because he was the one who orchestrated the full orchestra version of Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, which you hear a lot. So with piano, with a full orchestra. And Groffet created that version, and that is the version that is probably most performed out of all the different versions of Rhapsody in Blue that exists out there. That's because Groffet worked as sort of a staff arranger and musical assistant for the Paul Whiteman band, and that was the orchestra. That was the group that premiered Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. So that's why Groffet got involved with that. But he was a noted composer in his own right. In a way, today he's like a sort of a one-hit wonder for Grand Canyon Suite. But following Grand Canyon Suite, he basically wrote all these suites. So orchestral pieces consisting multiple short movements, like the Grand Canyon Suite. But he sort of traveled across the U.S. with that. So sometimes you might hear his Mississippi Suite, for instance. So there's like a Niagara Falls Suite that he wrote. Multiple different suites that sort of musically captures different parts of this country. But probably the most well-known is the Grand Canyon Suite. Groffet uses a huge orchestra, and it is very cinematic in scope. Again, with each movement, just in a way similar to the Rose of Sonora in the first half. Groffet kind of provides sort of the scene for each of the movements. So in this piece, the first movement is called Sunrise. So and it's a very majestic, slow sunrise over Grand Canyon. So it starts very soft, as you might imagine. And what Groffet does so masterfully in this piece is that he would repeat, in a way, he will repeat the same melody or same phrase multiple times, but for building up to a big climax. So in the instance of Sunrise, it also is a similar way. As the different things are highlighted by the rays of sunshine as it is coming up, he wants to create that feeling with different use of orchestration by let's say for this sound, to create this imagery, he might use muted trumpets, let's say, to see, and it's almost like it's very cinematic. So several years later, actually I think in the 50s, Disney actually made based on Groffet's descriptions of each movement, sort of created a mini film to go with this piece, go with actually the bulk of this piece, not the whole piece, but like a half an hour, almost like a short documentary, to accompany this piece. And that actually film won the Academy Award. So indirectly, Groffet won the Oscar for this Grand Canyon Suite. But imagine, like, it starts out with Sunrise, and of course it's a slow build from just a hint of the sun starting to rise into the full glorious sun that's now you can see what you could see just a little part of the canyon, and then by the end of the movement you can see the entire Grand Canyon in full view. So he will do this by repeating sometimes same ideas or same phrase many times over, but by, let's say, adding instruments, so adding different colors of orchestra to the proceedings. So there's always this sense of a journey in a way through sound. You're going somewhere. So in this case, you're going from just a little speck of the bright spot that's starting to kind of appear the very dawn of the day to the full sunrise. That's now you can see the sort of you can see the entire Grand Canyon in full view. The second movement is called the Painted Desert. So it's also in a similar way. Again, it's sort of considered in a way it's a slow movement of this piece, but it's also very much delicately scored. You can hear, like I mentioned earlier, sort of the very much sort of this Hollywood sound. You could hear sort of the common DNA of how composers, when writing for all sorts of different actions on screen or landscape, all of these things, the soundtrack composers use now, where they sort of got their technique in a way. And you know, Grofé was sort of a true master of orchestration and evoking mood and painting pictures through sound. The middle movement is probably the most famous one. It's called On the Trail. And this one, you can kind of just picture you can hear in a way sort of the slow walk on the horseback, just like kind of riding the horseback. Also is a very much descriptive movement. You can hear sort of the yin-ha of the yin-ha effect in a way, by how the instruments sort of glide or slice from one note to the other. It has a very comical effect, of course, and using all of these little musical devices that, you know, on paper, it's just a little technique, right? And then, but when you hear it, when you realize that sound, it just brings to life different imageries to life. And so On the Trail, that's probably most recognizable movement. And then it goes to the sunset. So again, it's a long, sort of the opposite of sunrise in a way. So that's the fourth movement. Then the fifth movement, the final movement, is called Cloudburst. So now the sun has gone down. You will start to see the moon and moonlit. And then, but you start to hear also sort of, you know, you start to hear this rumble in the distance. And here, the percussion section, the orchestra gets to really play with all sorts of different toys, different instruments, little, you know, they call them toys like back there sometimes, that create this amazing sound effect to bring this sort of impending or developing storm in the distance to full-on storm. And then it passes and it goes to this glorious triumphant conclusion as now the full moonlit Grand Canyon is now back and the storm has passed away and everybody's just like a bright, glorious, blazing conclusion at the end of the piece. So it's a very picturesque piece. Surprisingly, it's not performed that often these days, probably except for On the Trail, which you might actually hear more on sort of pops concerts, if you were to classify different concerts. But as a whole, it's one of the most brilliantly written pieces by an American composer. You know, right up there, pieces by, you know, with pieces by Copland or Bernstein, Gershwin, and so on. And, you know, it's sort of a piece that it's the piece that really maximizes what a modern orchestra can do, both individually. There you will hear so many different solos from various instruments in the orchestra, and also what they can do collectively. And so it's one of the most brilliant showpieces ever written, and it's a great pleasure for us to sort of bring this piece to conclude what promises to be is really a fun, eclectic program that I think will be. It sounds maybe a little bit different from many of the classical symphonic concerts that that might come to your mind. It's sort of a fun way really to open the season. So I hope you can all join us for the Rose of Sonora.